Now my eyes, if I just sit here, I should be in focus, but we'll see. Things never work out when you shoot yourself. So anyway, I thought that that would be interesting for you to know how this whole project started, and then I thought that I would just kind of talk about how I thought about it when I was thinking up this story and everything. So starting point was that Ken was moving back to Uganda to give his motherland a new chance. He wanted to kind of be a part of shaping Uganda's future, because everybody that goes there, or a lot of people that go back, they complain that, oh, the roads are not good and blah blah blah. A lot of stuff that is developed in developed countries.
So this is the nicer part of Kampala. All of a sudden everything changes. All of a sudden it's like the roads are nice, they're being fixed, and somebody here cares.
So he was complaining about those things, but then he felt like he wanted to go back and help the country shape into something that is what he hopes in the future. But he was really struggling to be a Ugandan in Uganda. And I think that whole identity crisis is what every immigrant suffers from. Struggle to kind of find their identity in their new place. But the irony was that he was home in his homeland. So the story that I thought of was this immigrant story, but opposite of what you usually see. So an immigrant that is returning home to what you would think is an easy transition into going back to where you come from. But it isn't all that easy. And to me, this film is a way to talk about racism and to talk about immigration without it being about that. Essentially, it's about identity, and it's about how complex life is. So the story is about that on the deeper level. It's about him coming back to a country that he hasn't really known for many, many years, but is now trying to understand and trying to adapt. And he comes there, and because he is an African, it's easier for him to kind of be, pissed off about things. If I would go there and I would think that, everything is shit, that would probably be racist of me to think that. But to see him do that and struggle with it, but still accept it and still love the country that he's coming to, that's where the interesting part is, I think, of this whole series. And I'm not gonna spoil what it's about, but that's basically what I thought was interesting in his struggle to coming back. But the story is also about him and Swahili Nation, the group that he was in, that was popping in like the 90s, and I guess the late 90s. They have a couple of tracks that was really big there, but they also had a good run here in Sweden, and they was one of the top groups at some talent contest at that time, and they finished second behind Infinite Mass, which was really good and big then. So they had this run, but Sweden didn't really understand their type of music. I mean, it was African R&B that was like influences of East Africa all around. There was like one Tanzanian, there was one two Kenyans, and then a Ugandan. So there was like a mashup, and then like the inspiration came from Sweden, the US, and East Africa. So it was kind of weird, I think, for a lot of A&Rs and a lot of people that was betting on what's going to be the next big thing. So that's what it's also about. And it's also about like the story of Uganda and the politics that took them to where they are now, like why Museveni has been in power for over 30 years, and all those things. And that was the interesting part, to me at least, in terms of what the story would be about. And then we started looking at like, how do we tell this story in the most entertaining and best way? And for us, the mix of him, his personal struggle, the music, his fight to kind of get a career going in his new life and all that, those were the interesting things, as well as the everyday stuff. And I just think, like, when I was looking here at the feedback I gave, because I didn't edit the whole thing, we had an editor that helped out, and I mainly focused on being a director on this. I actually shot everything myself while I was there, but having shot it for like 2 or 3 weeks maybe, but 3 weeks about 5 years ago, you kind of get distance to it all. So we wanted to bring in somebody new that didn't have, you know, the baggage of having made the Pearl of Africa, and to see new things. And my first like instructions to him was basically what I told you, and then to start off around there and try to edit all the scenes. So we started by editing every scene by scene. Once we had all the scenes, then I could start to piece the puzzle together. But we started with just editing every scene, and then once we actually had gone through and got all the scenes up, I started to thinking about the scenes, like, okay, so what does this scene say? Like, what is the essential narrative that we can get out of this? Because when you edit scene by scene, you will tell a different story than once you actually try to piece it together. So I usually think it's much better to edit scene by scene, and then you start to add layers and start to shape the narrative with interviews and stuff later, because that's not what you want to do when you're trying to see the scenes for what they are. So we started about looking at the scenes. Okay, so then I started writing, like, okay, so what is this about? And what I found was that the key thing here was him coming back, struggling with his car and the roads. Because I had so much with him just struggling, driving around, complaining about the roads, fighting to get a car to work that was always breaking down. And that felt like it was this symbol of his struggle that was very visual, and it was easy to understand for anybody, and anybody can identify with it. So I was thinking, okay, so we need to structure the whole story around that narrative, him fighting to kind of get, you know, his car to work. And that's where pretty much I based the whole story. And then around that, you always try to connect the different scenes and everything, and I felt like that was the key. And then in that we had to think about, like, how do we introduce the music? Do we introduce it early or later? All those things came on as we were doing it. So there was 2 parallel stories that I saw. One was the music, where he was trying to make his music videos, he was casting the music videos, he was making the music in the studio. So we wanted one progression that was his career, and then one progression that was him struggling to adapt to his country. And then those was the layers that we were working with. And then we added the interview story, which was based on, I guess, 3 interviews. Which then intercut to this to tell this story and to make it more clear. But that was basically how we thought out the story of this whole web series. And I'm not going to spoil it, because this is only the first episode that we've seen so far. So hope you liked the first episode. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and yeah, I hope to see you next week, and hope to tell you a little bit more about the process of making this, and also watch out for the next episode. See ya!